Welcome to another episode of Cut to the Chase. My name is Zerlynde and I'll be joined by my co-host Umar today to talk about COVID-19 conspiracies, what they are, how they proliferate, and why infodemics are more deadly than you think. So, without further ado, let's get into the main topics for today. We're basically going to be covering three broad topics. First of all, it's what are these conspiracy theories? We'll give you a few examples of them and we'll be debunking them as well. Then we're going to talk about the types of people that spread conspiracy theories. And then third of all, the psychology of why and how people share it and how they spread as well. And why is it unique to the time of COVID, right?
Yeah, so I think some of these things you'll be able to see a lot of when it comes to conspiracy theories. Ever since people have been knowing that COVID-19 exists, there's been a lot of speculations as to where it came from. Obviously the broad consensus is that, it came from pangolins in a wet market in Wuhan. But these things have been questioned a lot of the time. People are saying that, now it's been created by other actors who oftentimes have huge amounts of power and want this for their own incentives. But the worst thing about these things is that you see them without actually having much evidence for it. Sure, you may pick one or two isolated incidents which you're able to draw links, but these are extremely shaky and just don't make sense in the broader sense of things considering the amount of evidence you have. Let's talk about this one big one for a second. That Bill Gates created coronavirus in a secret lab. I just don't think it makes any sense. So the ideas that have come out here right now is saying that Bill Gates created coronavirus and he's been wanting to sell out, for example, microchips in the vaccines for COVID-19 in order for him to have his own financial gain, especially from his Microsoft being able to do these things. How this started is basically from an interview that was edited and cut to appear as though he said it. So these things can be easily manipulated by the people, and oftentimes the people who consume these things don't have enough information, don't have enough backhand knowledge to disprove these things with the other people saying that hey, this is interviewed and edited. But also they could also view it as something that people are trying to cover up by saying that it was cut and edited, even though it actually was cut and edited. But people think that you saying it's cut and edited is just a faulty attempt at trying to draw attention away from it. But also just the other idea in this is that's why Bill Gates has been so vocal about coronavirus, and this has been quite true. You see a lot of articles covering Bill Gates talking about COVID-19 and about what are the security measures that he has been saying are going to be good for COVID-19, his predictions as to when it's going to be safe for the people, and also just for example his efforts in funding different things about the COVID-19 fight against it, for example vaccination programs, or how he has been for a long time already predicting that there will be a pandemic soon and therefore people need to learn how to be equipped with it. So I feel like this is a stronger case for it, but still doesn't make sense because there's been no link proven. Just because Bill Gates has been talking about how pandemics are going to happen and how we should be better equipped to deal with it doesn't mean he starts the pandemic. Otherwise he wouldn't be talking about the ways to deal with it.
Actually, it was from an interview, right? What he said about wanting to control the pandemic, what they supposedly said was actually cut from another part of his interview where he was talking about monitoring people's financial situations as well. And obviously the Bill and Melinda Foundation has been very good at donating to foundations and helping with the fight against COVID. So something that can be easily debunked, but we're gonna explain later why some people will believe in it.
So no one has gone to the movies in a year. I haven't gone to movies in a year. And throughout this, we've seen the rise of other services, specifically Disney Plus, because now it's been the target of more COVID conspiracies that say Disney had the capacity and actually did take actions to create COVID-19 and release it so that people will be drawn to purchase Disney Plus subscriptions because people are at home, they have no alternative. So when it comes to Disney Plus, I think there's a few things here. Number one is just that it's a new service and It just so happened to have gained popularity at the same time as when the COVID-19 started, with the rise of shows like Star Wars has its own series with Mandalorian, and then like Marvel has its own thing with WandaVision. So these things are like huge properties already, and therefore it's like quite profitable for them to want to do so. But it still doesn't make sense because number one, this doesn't talk about why Disney has like the incentive to want to release COVID-19. Number two, how does Disney even have the capacity to create COVID-19? Just because they're big doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to engineer a virus of that scale that's deadly. Number three, just like COVID-19 has also decimated the types of things for Disney as well when it comes to Disney World, Disney parks. Kind of counterproductive to want to put up one service over another. Just doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't, right? And like there is like a common theme between like large companies introducing COVID, right? Like we see it with like Netflix and like other like streaming services. They say, oh, like the reason why they created COVID is because they wanted more people to like subscribe to their services, right? You know, if I was a CEO of like a streaming service or somebody like that produced films to like show in the theaters, it's not a sound decision for me to actually like release a worldwide pandemic, right? And like prevent people from using their money to like subscribe to your services in the first place, right? So totally doesn't make sense.
Let's talk about the third one here, about COVID-19 was introduced by aliens and space. That it was a foreign thing that came in through the atmosphere, came to Earth and decimated millions. I think it's quite easy to understand.
If there's like not a lot of proof about aliens, there's probably like not a lot of like proof that aliens are going to be introducing the virus. I think they would use more drastic measures to decimate the human race and not like slow pandemic if they were to actually invade us. But moving on.
I mean, actually, you know that G. Wells movie about how Martian people came to Earth?
Yeah. The War of the Worlds. The War of the Worlds, yeah.
Yeah, that one where they are like, you know, all the aliens died through like
human flu,
viruses
right?
on Earth.
Yeah, so like
so it actually is quite effective, but like
I mean, like that's coming from like an alien immune system, right? But then like we're talking about human immune system. How would they like know so much about immune systems, like specifically create a virus like this, right? But actually, there is a new conspiracy theory which was quite recent that Greta Thunberg actually caused COVID-19 to help with climate change, to raise more awareness about climate change, to show like the effects of like when you don't go out and like you don't like pollute the earth, like what are those effects. I don't see how like a teenage girl is gonna like bring about a virus. I'm pretty sure like geographically she wouldn't have been able to anyway because she like wasn't anywhere near China when it happened. It does sound like ridiculous, especially when you have evidence against it, but there is, you know, like there are people who actually truly believe in it and they genuinely have like forums and stuff like to post evidence. Another thing which is important to note is, you know, conspiracy theories about generally how COVID-19 can be prevented.
These things aren't as explicit and outlandish. It's more of challenging the severity of the virus. Well, of course we want to be safe from it, but the extent to which measures are being taken right now are just too drastic and actually do not like portray this virus of how dangerous it is. This is to say that this virus is not as deadly as it is, or it's to say that the measures that are being taken right now are restricting human autonomy but do not actually being effective in the fight against climate change. Let's deal with number one. The talk about COVID-19 is the same as the flu. Nope. So there may be certain things which are similar in being respiratory diseases. Few things here to note is that number one, when it comes to just the general death rate, I think it's quite true that COVID-19 has been killing a lot of people. So obviously it's uncomparative for you to say that more people have died from flu because more people have gotten flu because it's been over an extended period of time anyways, when COVID-19 has only appeared for a year. So these are the type of things when consuming data that people need to know more about. You can't just sample data from one place that seems like it's being true when you have to like actually show you how you calculate this data that is actually going to show you things that are more accurate and actually portray the true nature of these things lah.
Yeah, those are like, you know, like the main things that like actually have like, you know, penetrated mainstream media and like are actually being talked about by like big politicians, right? The anti-vax rhetoric has also been prevalent like with COVID-19. I think that a lot of anti-vaxxers already take like COVID-19 as an opportunity to actually, like spread the ideals. So like, the idea that vaccines are going to be able to change your genetic code. First of all, no, because vaccines use messenger RNA. They're like incapable genetically of changing like real DNA. I'm not equipped enough to like explain why, but there are like scholarly articles that like, do explain it. The idea of like, my vaccines are gonna have a microchip in them, right? Okay, so first of all, the microchip in question, is RFID microchips. They're not gonna work. Like, no way are they gonna be able to like be sent into your bloodstream. First of all, because they're not small, and secondly, because they're not like technologically nuanced enough to like even do anything if they enter your bloodstream, right? They're not gonna be able to track your location. They're not even gonna be able to get like samplings from your blood. Like, they're literally just going to be pieces of plastic in your bloodstream. So even if these microchips are going to be able to penetrate your veins, it's not going to be able to work. I think a lot of it was like founded from the idea that like vaccine syringes are going to have microchips on their labels, but they're not actually going to be injected into the individual that receives the vaccine, right? That's mainly actually like monitor the state of the vaccine, like whether it's being held like properly and whether it's been stored properly, to make sure like expiry date and stuff is like fine. It is a big like debate right now, and I think science prevails, and obviously the science disproves these theories. I think it's most important to look to science like during these times. Even like prevention and stuff, like you do have like really ridiculous like are usually forwarded on WhatsApp or whatever.
Things like vodka being used as hand sanitizer, or being able to hold your breath for 10 seconds means that you don't have the coronavirus. Or eating garlic prevents coronavirus. Snorting cocaine can prevent coronavirus. Or a more localized example, and drinking coconut water can cure coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, like, these things are really ridiculous. But I will admit, right, Umar, I actually believed in the hold your breath for 10 seconds thing, like, for coronavirus. Because, like, first of all, my mom told me, then, like, my teacher said, if you're able to hold your breath, it would work, right? I did my own research after that, and I decided, well, it's not actually, like, that simple. It's not black and white. But I genuinely did believe, like, which shows how harmful these things are, right? Because they seem like things that people can actually buy into, right? Which is particularly dangerous and harmful. We don't have to explain why. We're actually going to look at the types of people who spread conspiracy theories in the first place, right?
I think that when it comes to this, not necessarily it's always done with like harmful intentions. Obviously, you have the group of like radicalists who do want to push out their own extremist ideals about how COVID-19 works, and these people who want to be like anti-establishment. There's more on this later, but I think even when it comes to these things, it's just generally people around you as well, and especially since it comes from media sources, or it comes from people that you've been able to get information from the past. So for example, when it comes from social media, like you've been able to get information about real world things from social media as well, and therefore you don't oftentimes question it, especially if it doesn't seem too radical. Like you will also try to believe it. Or if it comes from the ways in like from friends and family, people also feel like, because you have some form of trust in them that they do have like good intentions that. So the point which they try to share these things, they are not trying to do it to harm you, but because it might actually be seeming legitimate, and this is new information that you wouldn't have otherwise. So you feel like this information is something that can be particularly useful, especially in a time where information doesn't seem like it's prevalent everywhere, and where people feel like things aren't being transparent enough. So any new information is good information. That's already something that's harmful when it comes from a lot of sources, including the ones that you place your faith in the most. So these things seem like an effort to differentiate yourself from the rest, where it seems like everyone is just caving in towards governments that have failed to stop COVID-19. So these people are seen as breakthrough discoveries, new information that the very government that failed to stop COVID-19 is trying to hide information from you, and then these people are giving new information. So they are more like anti-establishment. These people are giving you new stuff that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise. So people feel like I'm more inclined to believe this because it's coming from a source that's revealing the misdeeds of someone who has already hurt us, even if there's no actual evidence for it. Oftentimes the evidence that's provided that is given as well, but it's never shown why any opposition to it is not disproven as well. So even though it may not be the most like holistic of discussions that cover every single thing, people are not looking for that right now. That's not what people are trying to get out of these types of things. They are trying to get some form of like, they want to get information that they wouldn't have. People want to be calm, but actually these things are doing the opposite for them. So it is already something that's just really bad lah.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting because it kind of moves into our third and final topic of discussion for this podcast today. Basically, why do people share these conspiracy theories in the first place? But why is it that a lot of people aren't able to do that or don't want to do that, right? And how do they spread so widely in the first place, right? Like Umar said, there is psychological evidence as to why people are more likely to spread conspiracy theories disregarding facts and obvious logic, right? I think first of all, you have to understand that people oftentimes seek out patterns. It's objectively true that humans as a species try to seek out patterns, and usually the pattern seeking part of your brain actually does go into overdrive when you're presented with a threat or danger and stuff like that. The problem with this is the people who are the most susceptible to believing and spreading conspiracy theories now, also the ones who are most susceptible to being fooled into thinking there are patterns in random moving objects, for example. There's actually a whole study on this. It's quite interesting. We'll link it down in the bio if we can. But it's actually quite interesting because it also links into the primitive ability for why do you interact with people in the first place, right? And what are the cognitive functions that actually deal with this, right? So I think first of all, it can be divided into three, why these people do it in the first place. Why is it that they want to understand why COVID is happening in the first place, right? They want to understand why the environment is so significantly changed. They want to understand why it's such a drastic change in the first place. And secondly, they want to feel they're in control of the environment because they have that intellectual upper hand. They're able to feel oh, I actually know the true reason for what's going on. I'm safer than somebody who doesn't know and they aren't able to protect themselves from this, right? And thirdly, obviously, it's just the social circle that you mingle with. It doesn't even have to be intentionally you believe you're forced to, but just unintentionally you're influenced by the people around you, right? So that's just objectively psychologically it's interesting to see how psychologically how people are affected by conspiracy theories. Anything to add on this, Umar?
Yeah, it's an echo chamber of ideas that when these things are oftentimes repeated, so maybe the first time you're able to dismiss them, but then as it comes that you're able to see more articles, more evidence for it, when it's actually just these same things repeated from different perspectives, and then these times it gets integrated to you. That's why maybe sometimes when people are shown ads, they may get distasteful the first time and dislike it, and then eventually they get curious enough that this thing has been appearing for a long time, maybe I should check it out. So the same kind of thing applies to this as well. When people think that these theories might be absurd, then they click on the link because clickbaity titles or just things that are so sensationalized that people feel they have to know the reason for this. And sometimes people don't question the stuff that they read online, or people, even the times that where it's seen as a joke, people feel like when they say, oh, Bill Gates created coronavirus, people may say that as a joke, but then you may unintentionally think other people who don't know that it's a joke. So these type of things, the more times it's repeated, it can breed legitimacy even if the first time it isn't, because you start to normalize these things being talked about, and therefore eventually some people will cave in, some people start to believe in these ideas even if they don't fully believe in them. They may just spread it, or they just may have less trust in towards the people who are trying to do the best to prevent the spread of the virus. So yeah, this is also a reason why sometimes it gains more traction than it usually should.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a distinction to make between regular, your run-of-the-mill vaccines cause autism conspiracy theories, and there's a difference between that and actual COVID-19 conspiracies, and just conspiracies in the time of pandemics in general. Why are they generally more likely to proliferate, and why are they just that much more harmful, right? So I think just historically, pandemics, because of their their deadly nature, and because they take away, they limit humans from doing certain things that they want to, or it's invoke fear in people, right? I think why the human brain is going to be more likely to look at patterns that don't exist in the first place. These like conditions are like ideal to breed like conspiracy theories. People are out there thinking, oh, there's like a deadly virus like, you know, devastating our country, right? Like, how am I going to make sense of this? And like a lot of people, you know, they read behind the lines, so to speak. They believe that, you know, there's like some ominous, you know, underlayer to like this entire thing, right? Because it's so hard for them to wrap their like brains around the fact that, you know, one small virus can cause so much, right? It's not just something that happened with COVID. Things like conspiracy theories have like been prevalent, and you know, the AIDS pandemic, and you have like things like the bubonic plague. There was a lot of anti-Jewish rhetoric that was spread during those times because of these things. It's sort of like a coping mechanism for them, right? I think that people who aren't likely to have a lot of income and feel like they've been failed by their government, that then are in turn like not going to be willing to listen to government rules, because like why would they trust a system that has like systemically failed them, right? I think like that's a big issue for people who have been laid off by their jobs, they aren't able to get like stimulus checks from their government, or like they feel that their government has already failed them. Like that's why it's so unlikely that you're going to believe the things that are going to like be spread by the government. And I think like uniquely to COVID-19, I'm not even just talking about pandemics in general. I think you have politicians that have severely downplayed the effects of the virus when it first came up, and then when you see like cases rising like exponentially, like insane amounts, like 100k cases a day, you have that cognitive dissonance to be able to reason like with it and say like, oh, why are they going up so high, right? Like ignoring the science and stuff. Like you need to have that coping mechanism of conspiracy theories to like fall back on. So like that's something that's very dangerous about like these, you know, like just downplaying the virus in general. How does it snowball into something bigger?
Yeah, so all things exist when it comes to like massive changes in your society. People feel like this just isn't normal. It has to be part of a larger scheme that's been put out by someone else with bad intention. We need to stop trusting people who have failed us. We need to start like taking matters into our own hands and believing things that, you know, even though we normally shouldn't, sometimes we should as well. But beyond that, it also just justifies further like your internal biases that already exist. So I'm sure everyone has heard about how, especially in countries such as the United States, where there's growing anti-East Asian rhetoric because they are seen as the people who started the virus itself, right? So all these things about saying like how these people were starting the virus and created it for the purposes of biological warfare, independent of whether it's true or not, it's hurting a lot of people. So even if some of these things were to exist, which we don't think they do, but I think a lot of people are just being hurt by it right now. So all of these things can be easily prevented, provided that information that is given is actually representative of what's happening, and we give people the skills to be equipped to know how to find out what information is like actually good and which information is true, which information is bad.
Yeah, and it's important to note like although a lot of these measures can be taken by bigger social media like companies, and they are being taken, like for example you have fact checks on Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that, it's important to know that like what you can do as a person like or as a student, if you encounter people like that you personally know, try and get them like to not believe in it. Try to get them to see your point of view from a logical standpoint. It's hard to do that because these people are likely to be like too far gone to help or whatever, right? But try your best to actually reason with these people, especially if it's like, you know, in terms of things like the vaccine, where, you know, obviously in Malaysia the vaccine is optional, and we don't want people rejecting the vaccine on the basis that they think it's going to be microchipped or whatever. We want, you know, as many people as possible to get the vaccine. What you can do is, if you encounter those people, or if you know you're like an insane aunt who, you know, like forwards COVID conspiracies into like your family group chat, what you can do is try and de-escalate the situation. If you feel like they are too gone to like be helped, try and get other people to understand that it's fake, right? If you see these messages being sent, you know, you can send them articles, or like you can send them like fact checkers that actually prove that why it's like wrong and like it's not like actual proper information. Like what you can do in that sense is prevent other people from believing it, right? So that's something that like you as an individual can help with.
So if you know someone who has been, you know, personally affected by all of these things, just try your best to make sure that you correct the knowledge that they have to make sure that they're believing the right things, because it is for their own good and also for other people who just interact with them. We make sure that, you know, the rise of just fake information that's meant to hurt people is something that's just really shouldn't be condoned, and we should just like actively support any fight to curb it lah. So at the end of the day, all of this will create a better, more like unified response to COVID-19, and we will all be able to get out of this and be happier.
So I think that's it from us from this episode. It was really fun to talk to you about your opinion on conspiracy theories. Hopefully we'll see less misinformation being spread around by the time the vaccines roll out in Malaysia. I think that's it for this podcast. So see you guys next episode. Tell us your thoughts in the comments down below if you're from Instagram or on YouTube. And if you have any questions, you can always shoot us a DM at Cempaka Cut. All lower cases, no spaces. Until next episode, guys. Bye.